Because of transitioning at such a young age, in the past 6 months, I have watched my body fall apart and waste away in front of me.
I don't wish for a child to have the same result as I did.
I can't ever undo it.
Despite being autistic, exhibiting symptoms of trauma, he said that according to the WPATH standards of care, I was stable enough to consent to having my breasts removed.
A few months back, if you would have asked me if I think children should be able to transition, I would say yes. And I would probably give you some sort of lecture about how gender dysphoric children have to go through extensive therapy. And I would tell you that they weren't having gender affirming surgeries and that it was important that they didn't go through their natural puberty because it's hard for some trans women to pass if they go through their male puberty. Through my own critical thinking and my own research to find as many unbiased answers as I could, I came to the conclusion that the progressive left is doing way more harm than good. I feel like I must say a few things before I get into this because I know how people love to make assumptions. I do not identify with the Conservative Party at all. I would consider myself a liberal, and I'm also a part of the LGBT community. I am bisexual. And I'm done with all of this. I am done with everything that's happening. And I'm speaking out against the absurdities happening within this community. My sole reason for speaking up about this is that children are being harmed.
I wish the system, instead of spending millions of dollars on this kid, having them in foster care, support us as a parent. I just didn't want to lose my dad.
Being sold something that I believed was gonna help me and make me feel better and come out on the other side not feeling any better.
I was on 11 different prescription medications, and all of these were maintained by the same nurse practitioner, not even a doctor.
Now that we have brought so much awareness to this, to now that it has become a trend to be non-binary, transgender, and queer, and everything else in between.
Nobody said that the gender binary was easy.
All non-binary people use they, them pronouns.
Ers, or z's, and zers, or
just because we're trans.
That verb pronouns are valid.
Zer, I'm fine with.
Stabby Saturday.
100% valid.
Sexuality is trixic.
Let's talk about cupiosexuals.
That's what they said.
HRT.
Yesterday.
You'll see me there.
Person pan.
And I want to be the first trans woman to have an abortion.
We are bringing this into children's spaces at the same time.
This has been my first year in preschool with a class of my own. The topic of gender and genitals came up.
Step 1 is to normalize pronouns in your classroom. So a great way to do this is at the beginning of your class to use pronouns in an icebreaker activity.
So I'm not allowed to be out as trans non-binary at school. Of course, my response to this is to be as obnoxiously queer as possible.
Mixing children's spaces and the lies and the misinformation that the progressives tell is dangerous.
You want girl parts and you don't have them, you can do special surgery where they turn your penis inside out and there's a vagina inside.
Anyone here who would claim their identity publicly as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, or questioning, intersex, pansexual, asexual, or any category that I've left out. Do you want to tell everyone if you're a boy or a girl?
Okay. Phoenix would like you to know that she's a girl and she prefers she and her pronouns.
Going to Washington, D.C., we actually go and meet with our senators and representatives. After we do that, we go and sit and sell some of Avery's books for a little while.
I just don't want to even have a book. I've done too much in this world. It's ruined my life enough, and now everyone in this world is going to know.
And it's just gonna make my life worse.
A couple years ago, you wanted people to know.
Yeah, I did, but now that was really stupid, silly mistake, and now I don't.
This is an ideology. This is a belief system. This really should not be a discussion to children. And I'm not saying that children shouldn't know what trans people are. I'm saying that we should let them just be kids. This ideology has infiltrated in every walk of life. Doctors are in support of this?
Sure, yeah. Gender affirming care is life-saving care.
How vulnerable transgender youth are, but I'd like to take a moment to talk about how privileged I am to be able to care for them and how privileged I am to be part of a larger medical community that does. When transgender youth have unrestricted access to an affirming social environment and to medical treatments that they qualify for, they thrive. Now,
government officials are in support of this.
More than 50% of transgender youth in the U.S., which is estimated to be more than 150,000 kids, live in states in which transgender youth have lost access to or at risk of losing access to gender-affirming care.
My name is Admiral Rachel Levine. Happy Pride. Happy Pride Month, and actually, let's declare it a summer of pride. Happy Summer of Pride.
It's wrong that extreme officials are pushing hateful bills targeting transgender children. Not somebody else's kids, they're all our kids.
We felt such pride here in the South Lawn.
Public education is in support of this.
All of these are from the students, the description and definition I help them with. And as you can see, it hangs up on our social justice wall right behind me.
My pronouns are they, them. And I'm Ray. My pronouns are also they, them.
Public influencers are amplifying this message and being praised for it.
Hi kids! There's no such thing as a boy or a girl.
My dazzling trans youngsters.
My young trans powerhouses.
My courageous trans bunnies.
Beautiful, extraordinary trans kids. Hi, we love you.
You're extraordinary.
You're inspiring. You're exactly who you're supposed to be.
Don't let anyone tell you otherwise.
No one can erase who you are, no matter how hard they try. You are a gift to this world.
3 things that I could not live without during top surgery recovery. A mastectomy pillow. It also has a little pocket for your phone or little snacks or anything you want.
Because forcing somebody to go through a puberty with a dominant hormone that is misaligned with your actual gender is a forced mutilation by conservative standards.
I would like to talk about Dylan Mulvaney.
The articles written about me using he pronouns, and I feel like that should be illegal. Let's first talk tampons. It's not because I'm misogynistic, it's because you're transphobic. Somehow I love you. And P.S. I am also very nervous for you just because hopefully soon transphobia won't be as tolerated online, but your tweets are forever and I don't want those to come back and haunt you.
Dylan Mulvaney had the privilege of speaking to the President of the United States, Joe Biden, on behalf of all trans people. Even in the interview, Dylan says that they were only on 221 days of transitioning at the time of speaking to the president. What I have a problem with is that there are so many more deserving transsexuals that should be speaking to the President of the United States about trans issues. And the even bigger problem I have with this is that Dylan Mulvaney heavily advocated for children transitioning.
And do you have any messages to the families of trans folks that are seeking, options for their children, but are struggling to find resources? Do you have a message to those parents?
And Joe Biden went along with it and praised this notion.
Yeah, I do. This is blood of your blood, bone of your bone. Again, speaking to my son, when he spent a year in Iraq and he was a decorated soldier. He started a foundation I'm not allowed to talk about now because I can't raise money for it any longer. But it was for abused children. And one of the things he did is raise millions of dollars, this organization, to basically educate parents as to what they should not be afraid of.
The thing about Joe Biden is he knows what party is solely going to vote for him. So he's getting on his hands and knees for this community just to get their vote. Just a few years ago, he believed that marriage should only be between a man and a woman.
We have a law
the Defense of Marriage Act, where we've all voted, not where I voted and others said, look, marriage is between a man and a woman, and states must respect that. Marriage is between a man and a woman. What's the game going on here?
I'm going to get into everything shortly, and I want you guys to keep a few things in mind. The progressive left will tell you that none of this is happening, and they will say anything to shut your opinion down. They will call you transphobic, a TERF, and that you're bigoted if you disagree with them. They say that minors have to jump through so many hoops to get a gender dysphoria diagnosis, and that it's not just overnight.
In my case, I was prescribed testosterone after one phone visit and also approved for top surgery after one phone interview. Sadly, I'm not the only person this has happened to, and the number of detransitioners such as myself is sharply increasing.
They say minors aren't getting gender-affirming surgeries.
I had a double mastectomy at 15. There was nothing wrong with my still developing body or my breasts.
I'm going to get a hospital to say, we're going to allow a surgery at age 17.
They say puberty blockers and hormone replacement therapy is reversible.
The therapist told me that all of the changes were completely reversible.
They say your child will unalive themselves if they do not transition. They say that the detransition rate is very low. They say that the only reason why people detransition is that these people don't feel accepted as the opposite sex, so they revert back for the sake of society. This is the popular narrative, and it's deceitful. A lot of these people within this community will even tell you that sex isn't even real, and it's just a social construct. If that were true, there would be no reason for people to be transgender. It's not bigoted to believe in science. There are differences between men and women, and there are differences between women and trans women, and men and trans men. We should be able to embrace these differences and not try to diminish people's voices. The rapid onset of gender dysphoria. Why is this happening? Because it's a social contagion. A social contagion is defined as the spread of behaviors, attitudes, and it affects through crowds from one member to another.
And we actually develop a sense of self primarily through taking on the role of other, through role model. The beginning of my medical transition involved me being in a relationship with another trans person.
They were all very like, oh wow, like, you must be a trans guy because I'm masculine and I like women.
Adolescents are prone to social contagions because they are extremely more susceptible of peer influence and social media. In the past decade, there has been a significant rise of referrals for adolescent girls seeking gender clinics. The sex ratio for referrals has changed from predominantly male to female. Progressives have attributed the sudden increase of young girls identifying as trans boys to the greater visibility of the transgender community, and because it's more accepted now. However, if you think this were true, there would be an equal number of both sexes coming out as transgender. To that, I argue, this is due to a social contagion. In a 2018 study of parental reports of rapid onset of gender dysphoria by Lisa Littman, the study consisted of 256 parents completing a 90-question survey. More than 25% of the children had come out as gay, and more than a third had come out as bisexual prior to identifying as transgender. About 60% had at least one mental health disorder, such as anxiety and autism, and many others had a history of self-harm or trauma. Many of these girls had a borderline personality disorder diagnosis, and they did not meet the diagnostic criteria for gender dysphoria. The onset of gender dysphoria seemed to occur in the context of belonging to a peer group where one, multiple, or even all of the friends have become gender dysphoric suddenly and transgender identified within the same time frame. Parents also reported that their children had a significant increase of internet and social media use prior to coming out as transgender. Now we have children that would have never batted an eye about their gender identity, now absorbed into this ideology. I don't believe anyone has it easy going through puberty, especially young girls. Now, already vulnerable groups are being lumped into this gender dysphoria diagnosis and avoiding their natal puberty. And from the perspective of the progressive left, nobody likes straight, cis, white people. These individuals are doing anything they can to strip themselves from being oppressors to being oppressed. The people within this community will also take interest in you now and will praise you for how strong you are. This is being used as social currency. Some of the most narcissistic people I have ever met are the ones within this community. While countries like Russia have banned people from medically transitioning altogether. And I don't hear any trans activists in America speaking up about this. The United States and Canada's temper tantrums about pronouns are part of the blame for Russia enacting such a law. The left really want to talk about who has the most privilege. There's no strict guidelines in place for this medical treatment.
Within my very first visit, he gave me a prescription for testosterone.
I went to a gender clinic, and immediately she was like, yep, here you go, here's your letter for testosterone. It might have been like 45 minutes.
And they prescribed me 200 milligrams of testosterone for free in a 1-hour appointment.
Made an appointment and she gave me my letter of recommendation on the very first appointment in like 15 minutes.
This allows these medical professionals a great amount of leeway when giving a gender dysphoria diagnosis. Between 2007 and 2017, the number of transgender youth clinics went from 1 to 41 across the United States, and the numbers continue to increase. It's also important to emphasize that the US sex reassignment market size was valued at $1.9 billion in 2021, and it continues to grow rapidly also. This is just a business to these doctors. With the affirmative care model giving zero pushback, this leads adolescents and young people that aren't actually gender dysphoric to slip through the cracks. What's happening now because of this is that the individuals who have unresolved trauma, borderline personality disorder, and autism are all being labeled as having gender dysphoria and are on a path of lifelong medicalization. Those are only some out of the countless of reasons why adolescents and young people decide to identify with this ideology. Affirmative care gives people the ability to self-ID, children to self-ID. There is little information on the long-term use of puberty blockers for a gender dysphoria diagnosis. Some of these gender experts are going as far as saying that this form of treatment is reversible. These therapists, gender experts, and physicians are not identifying the root cause of these young people's issues. They slap a gender dysphoria band-aid on these vulnerable people and call it a cure-all. We can't just take what a kid and a teenager says at face value, and that's what's happening. Not digging to the root of the problem will cause more distress towards these individuals in the long run. The effects of puberty blockers. Puberty blockers have wide-ranging effects on the brain structure, function, and connectivity. Hormonal suppression of puberty may permanently alter neurodevelopment and can affect a young person's cognition, which can impact informed consent. This form of treatment has emotional and physical consequences.
So-called gender-affirming care. I was fast-tracked onto puberty blockers and then testosterone. The resulting menopausal hot flashes made focusing on school impossible. I still get joint pains and weird pops in my back, but they were far worse when I was on the blockers. A month later, when I was 13, I had my first testosterone injection.
Her Supprellin's working really well, so she has a very, very small penis. So my concern is that we're just now getting these children who have been on puberty-delaying hormones, and the penis never has a chance to grow. So when it comes to the surgery, we don't have the raw materials we need to make what we're used to.
There are potential irreversible side effects of puberty blockers on sexual function.
I'm experiencing sexual dysfunction at the age of 18. That's something that women usually go through when they're in their 40s to 50s.
I will say off the top that most people who are able to have orgasm easily before surgery can have orgasm after surgery.
I haven't experienced any sexual sensations. Marcy Bowers, the trans woman who is a surgeon, who did Jazz Jennings' vaginoplasty, or at least one of them. It was like a Zoom meeting during the pandemics, and it's all doctors. They think they're just talking to each other, but somebody got the tape.
Was an observation that I had that every single child who was, or adolescent who was truly blocked at Tanner stage 2 has never experienced orgasm. I mean, it's really about zero. These are just assigned male at birth, so trans feminine, and it's because they never in their lives are exposed to testosterone. That doesn't change. So blockers prevent the rise of testosterone, and they don't really go on testosterone at or around surgery or into adulthood.
It's when you're a child and you've been reading about this and you've been watching videos of influencers and you know what you want and you want it very much and you want it badly. You know, a child of 12 or 14 or will say like, well, I don't plan on having kids. You know, or they're like, orgasms sound gross.
Oh my God.
You cannot sign away your right to a thing that you have no idea what it is.
I really want to emphasize the risks of puberty blockers. This impacts growth, it impacts bone fragility. The long-term clinical consequences to grow long-term bone mass are still unknown. And the big one is sterilization. It can make you sterilized, infertile, you will never be able to have children, and that is not a decision a child can make. And especially for young girls, puberty blockers can put them into an early menopause. Puberty blockers were originally supposed to be used for precocious puberty, for very young girls around the ages of 5 and 6. Doctors hardly ever used it for older than that because of the risks involved. The main drug they used was Lupron, and some of the symptoms these young girls were having were multiple broken bones and their teeth were falling out. Lupron was also used to fight off certain types of cancers, in which this drug would kill off sex cells to stop the cancer from spreading. Lupron was also used to chemically castrate sex offenders in prison. And yet the progressives really think this is still a safe form of medical treatment for children struggling with their gender identity. Children struggling with their gender identity that they will most likely grow out of after they reach puberty. The idea that puberty blockers allow a child to explore their identity before their natural puberty kicks in is a nice thought, but it's ill-conceived. The progressives, doctors, and gender experts say that these children can make the decision to go off of them at any time if they decide being the other sex is wrong for them. It has been suggested that pubertal suppression may alter the course of gender identity development, essentially locking in a gender identity that may have reconciled with their biological sex during the natural course of puberty. Over 95% of youth treated with puberty blockers go on to receive cross-sex hormones. By contrast, 61 to 98% of those managed with psychological support alone reconciled their gender identity with their biological sex during puberty. These grown adults advocating for this identify as a woman one day, a man the next, and then non-binary the following day. You mean to tell me your gender isn't stable? So why would you put a child on experimental harmful drugs to become the opposite sex? Double mastectomies in young girls. In 2019, a total of 489 young girls whose ages ranged from 12 to 17 were given double mastectomies in an effort to eliminate gender dysphoria.
And it was only a month after my 13th birthday that I had a double mastectomy.
It ended with me having my first ever medical intervention being a double mastectomy at 16 before any hormones, before anything else.
The number 489 might not seem big for you, but you need to take into account a few things. The amount of public information on this is very limited, so the number could be greater. And second, this is 489 young girls who may not actually have gender dysphoria, young girls who may grow out of their gender dysphoria, have their healthy breasts removed from their body. They are making a decision that is irreversible and will alter their life forever. Progressives love to make the claim that if these young girls regret it, they can just get implants in the future. To which that, I say, is completely insensitive. They remove their ability to breastfeed. They remove their healthy, natural body parts before they reached adulthood, before most of them can even drive a car, drink, get a tattoo. In a perfect world, wouldn't we want to make sure that these young people are actually gender dysphoric and this wasn't brought on by a social contagion? Shouldn't we expel every other resource before having a minor make an irreversible, lifelong decision that will impact them forever? Why even take the chance of them regretting their surgery? Adults are making that decision for them, and it's not fair. European countries are taking a step back from gender affirmative care. Some European countries, such as the UK, Sweden, Finland, and France, have become more cautious about puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones for minors. And it's due to the lack of evidence showing the mental health benefits and a lack of knowledge about the harms. The NHS, the Sweden Health Authority, and the French National Academy of Medicine have all updated its guidance on treatment of gender dysphoria to reflect this, urging on the side of caution and using therapy as the first line of treatment. And here we are in America, where a California state bill was recently amended so that parents in custody battles may be liable for child abuse if they do not affirm the gender identity of their child.
The court put a parenting coordinator in place, and this particular parenting coordinator, though I did not agree that this was the one that we should use, I was forced into it. She was a radical trans activist, and within a couple of months had completely separated me from my child.
For the sake of sensitive audiences and YouTube's policies, I will be using the word unalive in replace of another word you might know. Uncertainties about long-term risks of medical transition are often overshadowed by the most potent argument provided by advocates for the affirmative care model. Failure to affirm a young person's transgender identity may result in unaliving themselves. These gender experts and physicians are repeating the same mantra. Do you want a happy daughter or an unalived son? From the wise words from sex neuroscientist Dr. Deborah So, asking any parent whether they prefer a happy, flourishing child or one that is unalived is morally bankrupt. What parent would prefer an unalived child? The unaliving statistic that the progressives keep repeating is a study from 2014, which found that 41% of adults who identify as transgender have attempted unaliving themselves at some point in their life, which has little relevance to do with children. The researchers of the study acknowledged the limitations, stating that they didn't ask respondents about what other mental health conditions they had, nor whether they identified as transgender at the time of the attempt. The parents of gender dysphoric children are irresponsibly being told that 41% of transgender children have attempted unaliving themselves, even though children under the age of 18 were not a part of this study. It's disgusting talking about this topic so loosely, because saying this to the wrong audience will put this idea into their head. Now, some children are going as far as to emotionally blackmail their parents with this threat. And of course, the parent is going to do anything they can to prevent an attempt to happen. The detransition rate. The detransition rate is increasing rapidly due to the rapid onset of gender dysphoria. People who have the courage to discuss their detransition online are met with suspicion, blame, mockery, harassment, or even threats from within the LGBT community in which they previously felt accepted in.
I mean, if we're going to be honest, every major medical organization supports gender-affirming care for trans youth. They say it's safe and it's life-saving. And there are numerous studies that back that up.
The study that backs it up for puberty blockers is the Dutch protocol, and the same scientists.
I have 10 studies that I can bring to you right now. But trans kids are valid, and it's not a decision that they're making.
Right.
It's healthcare.
The detransitioned FTMs always become TERFs.
Your detransitioning involves promoting rad femme ideology, specifically of the transphobic variety, and co-signing transphobia.
They heavily try to shut their voices down and invalidate their experiences. These progressives love to lie and use old statistics that benefit them. The detransition rate from 5 years ago is vastly different from now because, like I said before, there is a rapid onset of gender dysphoria, and it's difficult to find an up-to-date statistic. Across all 11 long-term studies done on gender dysphoric children, 60 to 90% desist by puberty, meaning they go back to wanting to be their natural-born sex. Critics are committed to finding faults in these studies because the results do not support their ideology and their political goal. Gender identity is flexible in prepubescent children and grows more stable with development and age. Avoiding their natal puberty is a disservice to them. Just ask any gay man or lesbian if they were gender non-conforming when they were a child. I bet you 99% of them say they were. And if they were raised in today's climate, they would be set on a path of lifelong medicalization to convince them that they were the opposite sex. The reason why most people detransition is not due to social pressure. It's because they were wrongfully put on a path of medicalization to begin with. Living their life as the opposite sex did not benefit them and gave them more dysphoria than they began with. To medically transition is not a one-size-fits-all cure, and it's being treated as such. We need to come together and speak up against this radicalized community of individuals that hijack the LGBT community. I encourage everyone to become critical thinkers. Just because someone identifies with this community does not mean they have the best intentions for others. At the end of the day, everyone has their own personal agenda that benefits them. Thank you for watching, and I really appreciate your time. As for anyone I may have offended, I'm sorry. And I'm sorry if I came across harsh in any way. Time is of the essence when talking about children medically transitioning, and I need to take that into account before your feelings.
The world's going to Hades in a handbasket, and we're going to debate the next 3 weeks, I'm told, gay marriage, a flag amendment, and God only knows what else. I can't believe the American people can't see through this.
I want to send a message to the entire community, especially to transgender children.
Bye.